Okay, I am a huge fan of the old 80s, old school CRPGs, computer role playing games, in case you don't know. And I just started playing the Might and Magic series. Hey, you guys binge watch TV series, I marathon play old 80s CRPG series. And I guess the idea for these videos is to let you even know these games exist. That there is an entire era of CRPGs that are unlike anything that exists now. Okay, it's a way of it's a type of CRPG that is just beyond anything you could imagine. Okay, to let you know how crazy these games were, what to expect, and hopefully establish even a little bit of curiosity or interest to at least check these games out and at least give them a chance. Because here's one of the bonuses to these games. The majority of them are shareware, which means you can actually download and play them for free. In fact, you don't even need to download them and play them through a DOS box, which is kind of annoying. There are actual websites that actually host the games that you can play through the websites through an emulator, and you can actually save the game through the site. So it's like, I would like to at least introduce you to an era of gaming that you probably otherwise don't know exists or have no interest in. It's crazy, I know, but the Might and Magic series isn't exactly my favorite old school CRPG series, and it's not the one I would have, chosen to start this whole thing off, but that's the one I started off with, and that's the one I'm picking. So to start off, because it's a party-based game, you need to create 6 characters. So we're going to go to the Create Character screen. Now, get used to this screen because you're going to be looking at it for the next 20 minutes. Because you're going to be hitting re-roll so that you can get half-decent stats for each of the different characters you're going to have. Because you're going to need at least 2 fighters, a mage, a cleric, and at least a thief. So if you have a knight, you're going to need a high might, a high endurance, a high accuracy, a high speed. If you have a cleric, you're going to need a high personality, a high accuracy, a half-decent speed. If you're having a mage, you need a high intellect, a half-decent endurance, a half-decent speed. So you're going to be hitting re-roll so that you can at least get half-decent stats for each of the 6 characters. Now the thing is, there are areas in the game where you will actually be able to increase your stats, so you're not really stuck with whatever stats you've rolled for the entire game. Now, I don't know what the maximum stats increase you can get, because I found that I didn't really need to go overboard on the stats to be able to win or play the game. So now, after having created your 6 characters, we go back to the main menu, and you can see that one of the options is go to town, and it's the pound key. Well, hitting shift 3 isn't going to do anything. What it's asking is, which town did you want to go to? Now, in the game there are 5 towns, and they're basically numbered as the number of the town. Town 1, Town 2. Each town has a name, but I can't remember what it is. Now, when you start off the game, you will be starting off at Town 1. Except, here's the thing. Each town has an inn. And the value and the reasoning behind which town it's asking to go to is that, you see, the inn is the only way you can save the game. Which means if you're out wandering around the town, or you're out wandering around the overland map, or you're entering a dungeon, The only way you can save the game is if you go back to the nearest town, enter the inn, and that's what saves the game. See, you could, again, you all start off at, town 1, but as you're playing the game, you'll eventually find town number 2, town number 3. When you enter the inn of town number 3, that's where the game saves. So when you leave the game and it's asking which town do you want to go back to, you'll type in town 3 because that's the inn your characters are in. Now, what that means is that if you're out exploring the town, or you're out exploring the overland map, or you're exploring a dungeon, the only way you can save your progress is if you go all the way back to town. If you die, if at any time you die, the game simply resets to the last town you entered and when you last entered. So if you're exploring the overland map for like a half an hour or whatever, everything you've explored, every fight you've had, every treasure you gained, every item you got is gone, and it resets back to your last save. Now, for most of you hearing that, that's probably a deal breaker. That ain't nothing. That's nothing compared to what's going to happen. Because, again, so you enter it, so we'll start off at the town. Now, as you leave, you'll notice that the town is kind of set up like a maze. Well, here's the thing, boys and girls. This game doesn't have an auto map, which means you're going to need this. This, boys and girls, is called graph paper, because you're going to have to map everything. You're going to have to map, because everything is based on a 16 by 16 grid. Every town is a 16 by 16 grid map. Every dungeon is a 16 by 16 grid map. The overland map is divided into sections of 4 by 5, and each section is a 16 by 16 grid map. So you have to map everything to be able to progress throughout the game. Now, obviously, none of you are going to actually want to spend the time mapping it. So, and again, it's 2020. You can easily go online and you can find FAQs and maps that you can use, and as opposed to having to, map yourself, because you're not going to do that anyway. Now, in regards to saving the game, as you gain levels, I think it's a 6th level spell. It's a 6th level cleric spell, which means you get it at 11th level. There's a spell called Town Portal, which means that wherever you are in the game world, you have your cleric cast Town Portal, and you type whatever number town you want the party to go back to, and that kind of helps makes saving the game a lot easier. You're not totally dependent upon having to constantly go back and forth. However, there's no way to go back to where you last were. So if you were in the middle of a dungeon somewhere and you have to leave and you want to save the game, you get a town portal back to the town you go to, but then you got to go all the way back to whatever dungeon you were last at to be able to continue progressing. Here's another aspect of the game, is that it's absolutely open world. Okay, there is no linear type gameplay in this. You can wander the overland map, and you can enter areas that are beyond your character class's capabilities, which is and your characters will instantly die. Be prepared to have your characters, first level characters, die all the time. Now, luckily, once they die, they'll just simply go back to the last save. So basically, gameplay is you explore a little bit, go back to the inn, save. Go out, explore a little bit more, gain levels, gain treasure, go back, save at the end. It's a constant going back and forth. But That's what games were like in the 80s. So now, so now I'm going to try to explain certain aspects of gameplay that are going to absolutely blow you away. Okay, so we're going to leave. Again, we've now started at the end. Now, if I turn around, you're going to notice there isn't anything there. But if I step forward, apparently I'm at the end. You see, there's no graphic for the end. When you hit a square that's a trigger square for like a certain encounter or whatever, it doesn't tell you. You have to step on that certain square to be able to trigger that square's event. So it's not like you're going to see in some area you will see a castle or whatever. But if there's a triggered area, you have to check every square of every map because you don't know where anything of any importance is. Here's the other thing. The game doesn't really help you because, to enter the castle, there are 4 castles. To enter the castle, you need something called a merchant's pass. Except here's the thing. The game doesn't tell you you need a merchant's pass to enter a castle. See, if you enter a castle without a merchant's pass, you end up walking so far into the corridor, and then you're automatically ejected from the castle. Except the game doesn't tell you why. The game doesn't tell you, by the way, you need a merchant's pass to enter the castle. In fact, if you end up coming across the merchant's pass, the game doesn't tell you, you now have the ability to enter the castle. You can get quest items and have absolutely no idea what they're for. Okay? That's how this game works. This is what you have to deal with from Might and Magic. Now here's the thing, okay? I really don't want to give spoilers, but there's a certain having played the first 4 games, I've noticed that each of the games trolls you. Now here's how it trolled me in the first game. So it's kind of like a warning because God knows if this happens to you and you're actually playing this game and this happens, God knows you're gonna be kicked. You're gonna smash the computer. There is an NPC. It's a trader, and what this trader has is, I believe, 2 pirate maps that you need to be able to progress into the main quest or something like that. Now, what this trader says is he will trade with you. And then you have a yes or no option. The thing is, the game doesn't tell you what will be traded. So now, the way the game is set up, it's got the players on the bottom. The first player, the one in the first position, is the one that automatically converses with whatever NPC you're dealing with. So when you type in yes to trade, what happens is the trader gives you the 2 maps, but trades everything in your character's backpack equipment with useless items. So whatever items your lead character has in its backpack is now traded with useless stuff. The thing is, now, when I first had this happen, I was like, okay, fine, whatever. There wasn't really anything in my lead character's backpack that was of any value. Except the problem is I didn't check my other characters. Because what happened is the trader doesn't just trade items with the lead character. It trades items with all 6 characters. Now, I didn't realize this until I had to go back to a castle and I couldn't get in. And it's like, well, why can't I get in? I have a merchant's pass. I went to check the character that had the merchant's pass, and I noticed that all he had was useless items. I checked all my 6 characters. All 6 characters, all their gear from their backpack has been traded and replaced with useless items. The thing is, some of those items were quest items. And unfortunately, I saved before I even, because I didn't think of having to check my other characters. So now all the quest items, all the key items that I had to go back and re-get them. That's what I mean about how this game trolls you. Welcome to Might and Magic 1. Now, one of the other things about I'm not going to really give an overall review or the plot or the story or whatever, because I want you guys to, because if you actually are going to play the game, I'd like you to figure it out for yourself, because that's basically that's one of the key things about Might and Magic 1. It's about exploring and discovering the game world. Because, okay, there is a main quest of the game, except much like with Skyrim and Arduin, it's irrelevant. Like, actually solving the quest of Might and Magic 1 doesn't really mean anything, because you can still keep exploring and continuing the game. The actual way to beat and win Might and Magic 1 is to be able to survive and map Might and Magic 1. Being able to map the overland map, because if you map the overland map, you basically conquered the overland map. Every dungeon that you've mapped, you basically conquered. Beating the game means mapping and conquering the game. That, because I've played the game, I've never completed the quest, because after a certain point, the clues are so cryptic and so they're so cryptic. You have no goddamn clue where to go or what to do or how to solve it, unless you go to an FAQ and actually have it explain it to you. I'm not doing that. If the game can't explain it on its own, then whatever. But because I was having so much fun and I was so enjoying the mapping and finding and the discovering, that to me was more than an offset of not ever actually completing the quest. I guess I should talk about the combat system, since combat is such an integral part of CRPGs, if you've actually gotten this far. I love the combat system in Might and Magic 1. First off, it's turn-based, which means the monsters take a turn performing their actions and doing damage, and then you as a player establish what actions your characters are going to perform, and then they do it. Sorry, no button mashing. Now, because it's party-based, because again, the problem is that with most games now, with most CRPGs now, it's basically just a first-person shooter with character stats and a skill tree. With old school 80s games, it doesn't work that way. It's like each character has its strengths and weaknesses. You got obviously your clerics and its healing powers, and not some buff spells to a point. You got your wizard with its magic abilities and magical damage. You got your fighters that can either attack melee wise or range. Now here's one of the aspects of Might and Magic 1 where the combat system that I love. Here's a typical screen for combat. Now again, obviously the graphics aren't that amazing, because again, it's 1980s. You work with what you get. Now, you'll notice that the first few numbers, the monsters, have plus signs. Well, that means those are the creatures you can attack hand to hand. So if you are attacking, so if you have your fighters with melee weapons, those are the only creatures you can attack in melee. The other creatures that don't have a plus sign in front of them are considered at range, which means you can only attack them with either ranged weapons or ranged-based spells. Now here's where the strategy aspect really kicks in with Might and Magic 1. And that is your fighters, your knight, your paladin, your archer, your thief, they're able to use both melee weapons and ranged weapons. So they can actually choose which group they want to attack. At the same time, your magic user also has spells that affect creatures that only affect them if they're in melee range, and they have spells that only affect the creatures who are at range. As an example, two of your go-to damage-based spells will be either Lightning Bolt and Fireball. Well, Lightning Bolt only affects creatures within melee range distance, or within melee distance. Fireball only affects creatures that are at range. Okay? And here's the thing. If you have like a group of, say 12 creatures, and only the first two are ever going to be in melee range, because once a creature from melee range is killed, it just simply gets replaced by someone from range. So if there's only ever two creatures in melee range, there will always be two creatures in melee range during that combat. If out of 12 creatures you start off with 7 creatures in melee range, once they get taken out, they're simply replaced by the ones from range, and there will always be 7 creatures in melee range. That's one of the game aspects I love about the combat system. So if you want to cast, if you want your mage to attack creatures from melee range, you have to have the Lightning Bolt spell, and you can only use the Lightning Bolt spell, and it only affects so many creatures. I think it's only like the first 3. Whereas a Fireball can affect up to 6 creatures, but only those in range. So when you start off, you have like a whole bunch of creatures that are in range, you can simply use your Fireballs. Your mage can use his Fireball spell to try and take out as many as possible, up to 6 in a row. But if you've only got them in melee range, your magic user can only use as a combat spell Lightning Bolt, and the Lightning Bolt will only affect the first 3 creatures. So that's where kind of that's an aspect of the strategy that I love about this game. Also, we got the monsters, and for the most part, I think there's almost like 200 different types of monsters. Now, obviously, the variations are very minor, but a lot of them have special abilities, be it paralyzation, turning to stone, causing you to fall asleep, causing you to age, poison, but they also have immunities. Some of them have immunities to fire, some of them have immunities to cold, to poison, but some of them also have more. There's way too many that have weapon immunities, meaning whether you've got a regular weapon or a magical weapon, they are immune to weapon damage, which means they're only ever going to be affected by spells. So this is one of the main reasons I love 80s CRPGs, is that because it's party based, actually involve strategy, and they involve a strategy to actually defeat the creatures you're fighting. I guess that's it for Might and Magic 1. I'm sure there's stuff I've forgotten or I've missed or I probably should have covered, but I can't think of it. I'm just basically going mostly off of memory. I probably should have, it probably would have been more professional and better to actually, do a video after I played it or while I was playing it, but I thought about it, 4 games later, so, what do you want? I'm spitballing this. What do you want, professional? What am I, like a professional game journalist? Well, no, I can't be. I actually know what I'm talking about. Hopefully I'll probably be a bit more polished or be a little bit more explanatory in other future videos, but hey, what do I know? And play the goddamn game, okay? Go type in, Might and Magic 1, play online, and just try the game. Okay, if you've gotten this far in the video, just try the game. Okay, you don't have to like it. Just try the game. And if you do like it or if you hate it, in the comments, tell me what was wrong. Tell me, just try the game. That's the main purpose of this video, is to let you know these games exist, what to expect, and at the very least, just try the goddamn game. Okay? Please. Okay, I'm out of here. See ya.